This is Jim Harvey of Bluenotes.com. We're doing our annual NCAA Big East basketball preview shows today. And the panel consists of Cole Pepper-JNXT-4 in Jacksonville, Jack Daley of Holyland of Hoops, and we should soon have Tristan Freeman from Busting Brackets and Jon Nyatawa from Creighton. And if we're lucky, we just might get John Fanta from Fox Sports. This is the third annual preview. NCAA goes first, and then we'll do a separate preview for the Big East. So without any further ado, we're going to start off with Cole Pepper. Go ahead, Cole. Take it away.
Well, to me, the big storyline going into the season nationally is not necessarily who will be playing, but who won't be coaching. For the first time in, I think, 675,000 years, no Mike Krzyzewski, and additionally, no Jay Wright. So you have two of the most accomplished coaches in college basketball history who won't be on the sidelines. Of course, last year, Roy Williams stepped aside. So you have a few remaining old guard coaches like Bill Self and Tom Izzo and a few others. And then you have a lot of young coaches or coaches who are trying to establish themselves, even if they're veteran coaches, in that next tier of coaches who have won national championships. I think it's going to be very intriguing to see how the personality of the season plays out without those two very big figures in college basketball being a part of it. But, having watched the national championship game in New Orleans, I was extremely impressed with how Hubert Davis had North Carolina positioned. I think they have to be the preseason number one, even with Kansas returning some key players. North Carolina is still got a very deep team. Baycott coming back and spurning the NBA certainly is big. And I think you have to start the season with considering that North Carolina is the team to beat this year. Not the only one. I mean, certainly Duke is going to be a part of things there. Gonzaga, Baylor, Houston. Again, the defending champs. I think Kentucky's going to be in the mix as well, in addition to Kansas. But I think North Carolina is the team to beat coming in. The other thing that I'm intrigued to see is how, because we've certainly seen it in college football, is how the transfer portal starts to impact college basketball. And if we're going to see some teams that go from non-contenders to suddenly being a contender for a Final Four because they get those right two guys maybe to come in and fit the system. Some of the COVID years are starting to wear off where you don't have guys who could be in for an extended period of time. But there are, I think, deeper rosters right now than I have seen from the top 10 than we've seen in a lot of years.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, Tristan, how are you?
Oh, good. How you doing today, James?
Good. Give us your take on the national scene, if you would.
Yeah, I think it's going to be heavy on quality backcourt play when you look at teams like Houston and Baylor and what they have going on. I think you look at teams like Kentucky who have the front courts that can win a title, but there's some questions in the backcourt, whether or not Severe Wheeler is a player that you can make a Final Four run with. Gonzaga, when you have Nolan Hickman, who's supposed to come into the fold, is he ready to be a point guard that can lead them all the way? You look at teams like Creighton with Ryan Nembhard, who could be on the cusp of a national breakout campaign. Arkansas, whose team primarily going to be led by a bunch of guards, led by Nick Smith, who's arguably the top freshman perimeter player in the country. UCLA, who's a team whose backcourt with Tiger Campbell and Amari Bailey could be one best in the country as well. I think there's a lot of talk about how, all these returning big men are going to be the stars of the season. Statistically, they will be, but I think, as usual, it'll be defined by which backcourts are the ones that perform best in March.
Yeah. Tristan, Jim is having some internet difficulties down in the south of the border, so he's going to be dropping in and out occasionally. But welcome aboard. He actually did the intro before you hopped on. So I think that's interesting. And Cole, obviously, I've got a vested interest in the changing guard of coaches. it's been very interesting. And I still, despite what Jay Wright said, has gone public and he's still involved with the school, I have to believe the changing landscape of transfer portal and NIL had some impact, that not wanting to be a part of that going forward. And frankly, he didn't need to. Obviously Shevsky made the decision a while back, but it is going to be interesting when you look at the transfer portal, the impact it does have on those one or two schools that have, one or two guys that could really make a difference. Traditionally though, if you look at it, the teams that have been most successful are the homegrown ones that have the talent that have gotten old together and gotten big and strong together. That's who's won it recently. And so backcourts that are strong, to Tristan's point, and I do think North Carolina is probably the consensus preseason number one. Armando Bacot seems like he's been there forever. I like to bring up the fact that he was a classmate of Jeremiah Robinson Earl in high school, so that probably gives you some idea of how long he's been around. So it's I guess I shouldn't talk when we had Colin Gillespie and Dwayne Samuels forever, but it is it's interesting to see how that will play out.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the veteran side of things, particularly I think when it comes to tournament time, when you have a little more banging going on, and usually the whistles get put away to a certain extent in the postseason. Big physical, strong teams who can make shots when they need to and who can get it done down low can make a difference. Perfect example, David McCormick last year in the championship game. There was good David McCormick, bad David McCormick for Kansas throughout the course of the year. And in the tournament, he really put it all together, and he was able to play against a very strong front court with the likes of Bacot and Manick and some of the other big bodies that North Carolina was able to throw in there, but he made big shots down the stretch.
Yep.
And, Tristan, to your point about the importance of guard play, there's no doubt about that. And I think that right now there's so much depth in the guard play in the top 10 or 15 teams in the country that I think you probably have teams in all the top 16, which you would go in thinking, all right, these will be your top 4 seeds in each regional. I think any one of those teams could wind up being a 1 seed. I don't know if any of them can be the number 1 team, but I think any of those top 16 teams could wind up being a 1 seed by the time the tournament bracket is announced in March.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm going to try to step in for Jim while he's figuring out his technical difficulties. And Jim, we just got through the first round of questions. So I don't know if it's still recorded while you stepped away. Hopefully it did. But what was the next one after kind of leaders in the field in the clubhouse coming out, and what else did you want to get into? We started to touch a little bit on the transfer portal and the NIL impact. Can you hear us, buddy?
Uh-oh.
Okay, I guess not. All right. So, Tristan, if you look at, Cole kind of laid out who he thought would be, kind of top 10. I really like your Houston pick. I think they're stacked. Having seen them up close, that's an athletic team that, defense carries, right? Defense travels. Those guys are strong. Any kind of sleepers out there that you see that, aside from the Creightons of the world, which a lot of people are picking. Who else is out there that kind of wouldn't surprise you if they made a deep run?
Yeah, I think when you look at the SEC, all eyes are going to be on Kentucky because of Chishibwe coming back, and then Arkansas because of their elite freshman class. But there's a few other teams that truly have Final Four potential, and one team I'm looking at is Alabama. Mm-hmm. They lose several guys. They lose Shackelford. They lose J.D. Davidson. I would argue, in a way, it's sort of addition by subtraction because the backcourt chemistry was just bad last year.
Yeah,
it was not good defensively. It was sort of your turn, my turn. Guys had assists because the offense is so explosive that everyone's going to put up points. But as you saw at times, they would just lose to bad teams for no reason. I think the addition of Ohio transfer Mark Sears sort of stabilizes the backcourt. 5-star prospect Jayden Bradley come in. They won't have Javon Quinterly back until SEC play, but they still have 2 quality point guards without him. And then you add 5-star wing Brandon Miller, who's been great so far on the Expedition Tour. He's someone that could potentially lead them in scoring. And then Charles Bediako is probably going to follow that track of the raw big men who have an up and down freshman year, but then once they get it together sophomore year, they have a breakout campaign.
Yeah.
I would say he'll be like the next Mark Williams of Duke, but I think he's someone that could easily average 14, 8, maybe 2 blocks a game. And if he stabilizes defense on the interior and the guards are much better defensively as well, while the offense still remain in top 10, they're absolutely a team that could not only win the SEC, but make a Final Four run and possibly contend for a title if everything clicks.
Great call. Cool. How about you? What do you think is in terms of a sleeper or dark horse?
I really like that Alabama pick as a team that could jump up there. A team that's probably not going to start the year in the top 25, who I'm going to be keeping an eye on, is Miami. Again, you talk about backcourt experience and guys who can handle the pressure. Nigel Pack and Isaiah Wong both certainly showed that last year. I think there's a real separation between Carolina and Duke in the ACC and 3 or 4 other teams in that conference. Somebody's going to jump up and be the third team, or maybe sneak in there into the top 2. And whether it's Virginia or Virginia Tech, Florida State, I don't really see this year as having that kind of potential. But Miami is a team, because of their backcourt play, that it probably won't start in the top 25. But I think that's a team to watch for, to maybe be able to creep into that top 10 if they can get some key wins. On the road in the ACC, again in a league that's not as top heavy as it sometimes has been in the past, with just those the 2 blue bloods. I think Miami's a team to watch as well.
Okay. Good.
That points about Miami are well taken, because everybody's just, as a matter of course, is saying Virginia. But you're right with Pack and
Wong.
the other guy,
Wong,
Mr. NIL. They should be formidable. They really should. Okay. I'm sorry about the break, fellas. I lost my internet, as I was saying before, but it looks like the video kept recording. So
good.
We didn't lose anything. Okay.
Jim, we talked a little bit about, the changing guard of coaches, the impact of the transfer portal and NIL on some of the coaching changes that, what will that have an impact in the future? But I think we could probably dig into NIL a little bit more, and who are we seeing initially as having some great success with that? And because frankly, looking at recruiting down the road is going to have obviously a huge impact.
Okay, well, that's great. I don't, other than Ruiz in Miami and the fellas in Kentucky, with all the various and assorted cooperatives and collections, or whatever they call themselves. Ruiz has made the biggest splash, as far as I know. Let's see, who else? There was.
Well, what have you seen on it? Is it as big of a deal as people were worried about, or is it leveling the playing field, or not leveling the playing field further?
I think level the playing field is more the case. We may see the Tennessees and the Kentuckys and the big money cartels actually unbalance the equation, but for now, it seems like NIL is leveling the playing field, where you got little guys like Miami and Creighton who can grab some significant talent out of the portal and in recruiting. Look at Providence this year. Providence is going buck wild this year and next year with high school recruits. They're recruiting like there's nobody's business. Tristan's Pitt team, I think, is supposedly really kicking it with recruits, high school recruits, I think, this year. And there's a lot of teams that fit that kind of formula, right now.
I think last year when we talked about NIL a little bit at this time, we talked about it being the Wild West and nobody really knew how it was going to shake out. And I don't think it's gotten to modern times, to use the civilization mentality. But I think what I'm seeing is that the NIL is impacting schools in basketball in 3 different tiers. One is the big schools that have plenty of boosters who have willingness to spend money to get those.
Yeah.
I don't know how much
Florida,
that's changed over the years. Certainly the state laws in each state have impacted how those things have been put together. But so the Kentuckys, the Kansases, the Carolinas, the Dukes of the world,
Florida
are and I'm just talking about from a blue blood tradition and a heritage tradition. Those programs are still going to be strong.
Yeah.
You bring up a school like Florida or Miami, probably another tier down from Florida. Those tier of schools, I think, are going to be the most impacted, maybe positively, maybe negatively on a case-by-case basis by NIL. But one of the most intriguing parts of NIL to me are the smaller schools. I just had a lunch with somebody here in Jacksonville who is a part of the JU cooperative that they're putting together for Jacksonville University. Now, listen, JU's basically got one claim to fame. That was Artis Gilmore took him to the national championship game against UCLA back in the early 70s. Maybe D. Brown before he was given blind slam dunks is the other one. But this is a school with some basketball tradition who's competing in the Atlantic Sun, the A-Sun Conference, which is not exactly top of the heap from that standpoint. But how it impacts schools like JU and even slightly larger conference schools than the A-Sun, I think is going to be very intriguing because some places being able to give $500 to a student athlete to be on a TV commercial or something like that might make the difference. And so that could impact not so much the national picture, other than you may see some other programs that get better organized in that way, be able to get one or two other recruits, and suddenly they're winning the conference tournament and finding themselves in March Madness.
Right. Similar to the case at Howard University in DC.
Mm-hmm.
Howard's been hitting the transfer portal very hard. I don't know about their nil piece, but they've been grabbing some guys off the West Coast and guys that went to the bigger name schools who either weren't getting the playing time or had issues with coaching or whatever. And they hit the transfer portal, and Howard's picking them up like peanuts, picking up these guys left and right. The big name that came to mind was the center from, I want to say, USF or somewhere out west. There was the center they picked up who was a 5-star going to Howard University. That's crazy. You never hear about things like that.
Well, Anton left Nova to go to Radford. Obviously he didn't pan out at Nova with the injuries and all, but it's interesting. Tristan, you were about to say something as well.
Yeah, there's 3 examples of NIL coming into play for the mid-majors. You look at Yuri Collins, who entered the transfer portal for St. Louis. There's rumors that he was going to be going somewhere like Tennessee. Then all of a sudden he leaves out, and speculation was that St. Louis was able to find the money for him to be able to come back via NIL deals. Antoine Davis, who's one of the top scorers in college basketball history, he also left Detroit Mercy. And they were able to come up with a nice little sponsorship glow balls deals from China that was keep them there. And then Jamarian Sharp also did the same thing in Western Kentucky, one of the nation's shot block leaders. He leaves the portal and then eventually comes back as well. So you're seeing major stars that don't necessarily have to go if their programs are able to find a way, because obviously the big schools are going to have the NIL more money. But if the smaller schools can say, hey, you can keep having your large role and be the focal point of our offense, while also being able to be compensated for it, that helps them as well, and sort of neutralizes how the transfer portal keeps taking all the mid-major players. Some actually was able to stay this offseason.
That brings up a point. The fine line that schools are walking between NIL and pay for play. That's next on deck, from where I sit at least, for the NCAA and the conferences to really start to try and crack down on that. And that's where a lot of these nil collectives are gonna hit the wall when they really start policing the NIL versus pay for play, because a lot of these situations, especially with named players, it's definitely looking like pay for play.
And in many cases, it is absolutely pay for play with a veneer of something on it. I had a conversation with a former NCAA enforcement officer who's now no longer working for the NCAA, hasn't for the last 10 years. But he said that, he was involved with the UNLV investigation with Tarkanian back in the 90s. And he said that even then, they didn't have enough bodies to really investigate it. There's just a resources issue with the NCAA. And of course, there is the self-reporting process that happens with the NCAA as well. But, when you're talking about a school that thinks that they're following the rules that really aren't well known, and there's a lot of gray area and interpretation and the different state laws that are impacting how things operate, you're not going to get people self-reporting NIL issues. That's just not going to happen. So I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of, unless somebody runs way afoul of things with an NIL deal where, somebody's just delivering a suitcase of cash to somebody's hotel room, which again, say it's an endorsement deal, and all you have to do is have one picture taken and put it in an ad somewhere, and it's an endorsement deal suddenly. So to me, the most intriguing area of NIL is how those larger mid-majors, schools that have been in the Western Kentucky, for example, that level of a program, how are they impacted over the next 10 years by NIL and also secondarily the transfer portal? Are we going to see a widening gulf between the haves and the have-nots, or the used to haves and the still haves? I think that's something worth following in college sports in general, but certainly in college basketball.
Right. Any other takes on this NIL stuff? Okay. What did you talk while I was gone? Did you talk about breakout players at all?
No.
No.
A little bit. We touched on the top teams and the backcourts and some of the folks, but I think it would be good to go ahead and talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. What say you about national breakout players? Whether it's the Pac-12, the ACC, the A-10 for Tristan, and whoever else. What say you about breakout player?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at the A-10, I think the obvious candidate is going to be Daron Holmes of Dayton. I mean, if it wasn't for the awful start of that young team, they would have been in the tournament. And Holmes, who was a top 50 prospect, so it wasn't out of nowhere for him, but he led the team in scoring, quality defender and shot blocker, and it just kept getting better. And because of all the quality big men in the country, he flies a little bit under the radar, but he's the kind of person that absolutely can take over for them and not only lead them to a tournament, but really make a potential run. And if you look at the ACC, I think the obvious candidate there would be Matthew Cleveland of Florida State, former 5-star prospect, averaged 12.5 a game. He's a 6'7" wing, all the tools. He's a potential lottery pick if things go well. And the interesting thing about him is that despite playing on the perimeter, he only made 6 3-pointers last year. And that was an area where he just didn't feel comfortable shooting at all. I think there's expectations that that's going to change, that he's going to become a much more willing 3-point shooter. He can already score inside, a good jumper, can get to the basket. And I think with improved point guard play, which will help as well, I think Cleveland's the kind of guy that can go to 15, 16 points a game. And if you are looking for that third team in the ACC behind Duke and UNC, I think Cleveland's development will go a long way in determining whether or not it's the Seminoles that can take that third spot.
And I'll just pull 2 players who played a little bit in the national championship game from the big schools that could potentially be breakout players. One is Puff Johnson from North Carolina, who kind of came out of nowhere late in the season. There were North Carolina fans asking me, who is this guy? Well, I don't think they're going to be asking about that this year. He won't have the front line. He won't be the main cog in that offense with Baycott certainly still there, but I think he's one to watch. And then for Kansas, KJ Adams, who got playing time in the tournament last year, very athletic, but with the loss of Ochai Agbaji, the chance to add another long wing, I think is going to be something to watch as far as Kansas is concerned. So when you talk about the 2 teams that played for the title, they are replacing some bodies, but I think they have some firepower to come off the bench or fill in some key roles.
Right. I was looking here, John Rothstein's top 20 breakout guys, and Worley was on there. Puff Johnson's on there. But they also have some ACC guys, Jeremy Roach at Duke, Beckman at Virginia. Where's the other one? I thought there was another ACC guy.
Yeah,
I don't see another ACC guy, but they also had Toppin at Kentucky, an Auburn guy, Zakai Ziegler at Tennessee. There's quite a few ACC and SEC guys on this list, and of course some Big Ten guys. What do you think about West Coast guys breaking out? Clark at UCLA, who is it? Larson at Arizona. Those guys.
Yeah, given the opportunity, of course, every year you're going to have some guys take a step forward. I'm not sure if this qualifies as West Coast, but KJ Simpson at Colorado is another one to watch, who is sort of developed as his career has gone on. He's going to be relied on a whole lot more. It's interesting too how breakout players have changed so much over the last about 10 years in college basketball. At one point, the breakout player was the sophomore who was maybe the seventh guy on the roster who suddenly gets into the starting lineup. Now it could be the transfer. It could be the freshman who finds himself in the right situation, and or the grad transfer who suddenly goes from playing as a key player in a smaller conference, and now he's stepping in to play at a larger role at a bigger school, or a large role at a bigger school. It is. You have to be an air traffic controlman or do it every single day like Tristan's doing it to figure out who's going where and who's going to go into a situation that really fits. There is so much movement in college basketball now that you almost have to start with a fresh whiteboard, every September to start saying, all right, well, who's where and how does he fit? And I think that adds, again, to the point I made about the changing landscape of coaching in college basketball. When you start losing these big name coaches who you know what their approach is, now you have to see how that all impacts the player movement as well.
Mm-hmm.
McDermott from Creighton was on with John Rothstein yesterday, day before, and he was saying much the same thing. It used to be you knew what you had, and you could work around that. But with transfer portal, even with regular high school recruiting now, every year is a new guessing game. Every year is spin the bottle and see what happens. And then you have to start from scratch every year.
Yeah, the fact is they're re-recruiting their own players every year at this point. I mean, that's what's going to happen with many of these schools, because anybody who has a short fuse and wants to get playing time and maybe hasn't earned it according to a particular system could be open to be poached. Yeah. And they're getting calls every day.
Tristan, I'm sorry, Jack. Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Oh, Tristan, any wild cards for these West Coast or unknown guys, under the radar guys for breakout?
Yeah,
other than the Dayton guy. I mean, but he's not unknown.
Yeah. If you want to stay out West Coast, I think USC Reese Dixon Waters. He's a guard that got a fair amount of playing time. Former top 50 prospect as well. With the Trojans losing Isaiah Mobley, it's now going to come on to the guards to lead the way with Boogie Ellis and Drew Peterson. They're going to need another double-digit scorer coming out the backcourt. I think Dixon Waters is most likely to do so. And they're speaking of the third spot in the Pac-12 behind Arizona and UCLA is up for grabs as well. If USC is going to be that guy, you're going to need not only the freshman forwards to come in and have a big impact, but I think Dixon Waters could be the X factor of the team this year.
Okay. It's 12:30. Before we shut this down and go to the Big East, who's your Final Four pick and who's your champion pick? Well,
I'll go first. I think my Final Four this year would be Gonzaga. I'm also going to have Alabama, And then I think it's too early. I wanted to say Creighton, but I think it's just too early for that core.
Way too early.
Yeah, so it won't be them. But I think if I had to pick two more, I'm going to go with UCLA. And then I'm also going to go with Baylor.
Yeah. Okay. And the winner?
I'm gonna go with a sneaky one. I think UCLA, because I love the defensive potential of what their lineup is, and I think they have enough offense to win it. I think this might actually be the best roster compared to the previous 2 years that they have. This might be the one that can win it all.
Okay. Okay. Jack?
Yeah, I got to tell you, Tristan, you nailed it. In my opinion, with UCLA, I think that they're loaded and they will be there at the end of the day. I also, you know, as much as I would like to see Creighton get there, I'm not sure yet. On them. Just need to see if they truly progress. I do think North Carolina is going to get back. I think that they are just loaded. Their backcourt's really strong. My other two are Houston. I think Houston's going back. I think, again, defense travels, and man, those guys are just brutally tough. And then fourth could be a Baylor or Kansas. I think Kansas could get back there, and they're just, you know, I think he's the premier coach now, is no question, and they're loaded again. So, and I'm going to go UCLA. I think they win it all.
Okay, Cole.
All right, I'm going to agree on a few of these guys. North Carolina to me is the team to beat to start the season, so I'm going to stick with Carolina as number one. I like Gonzaga, especially if Nolan Hickman can replace Andrew Nebhard well enough. With Drew Timme coming back, they certainly will have plenty of experience and guys who can perform. At some point, Gonzaga is going to get over the hump, right? At some point, they're going to win a championship. I just don't know if it's this year, but I'm going to have them going back to the Final Four. I'm going to have the defending champs, Kansas, getting back because of the coaching of Bill Self. Jalen Wilson coming back certainly was a big part of that. They have a very deep team. They have a deep team for talent, maybe not quite as deep as experience as they had last year, but this is a deep and talented team. And just to be a little different, I'm going to take Arkansas to make that move this year. They certainly showed what they had last year from a potential perspective. I think this is the year they get over the hump, and I'll have North Carolina winning the championship.
Arkansas's got a lot of new faces and new places, and they're going to Maui, so we should find out fairly early how good they really are.
Well, if you're going to go to Maui too, give us a good report from the beach.
Yeah, okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, for your expertise, and for your great and depth of insight on this upcoming 2022-23 season. I appreciate it, and thank you very much, and we'll see you again next year, hopefully.